Welcome to today's breakdown of Persona 5 The Phantom X. And yeah, things are getting pretty wild in version 4.4 as of June 25th, 2026. In this tier list, we're ranking the absolute best characters you can build around right now, including heavy hitters like Hatsune Miku, Makoto Yuki, Ange, and the iconic duo Justine and Caroline. And let's be honest, if you've been keeping up with the meta, you already know Ange is sitting comfortably at the top as one of the most dominant units in the entire game right now. In this video, we're diving into who really stands out across DPS, sustained support, and navigator roles, and why some characters are climbing while others are slowly falling out of the spotlight. Whether you're building your first team or optimizing endgame comps, this tier list will help you figure out exactly who's worth investing in and who you might want to skip for now. So stick around, because we're breaking everything down in a simple, no-nonsense way to help you stay ahead of the meta. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking characters in Persona 5 The Phantom X. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Kiyoshi Kurotani, Yukimi Fujikawa, Kotone Montagna, and Tomoko Noge. Now we are getting into the part of the list where things start to feel a bit awkward rather than outright bad, because these characters in Persona 5 The Phantom X can work, but only when everything lines up just right. Kiyoshi Kurotani is a fire saboteur who plays around his maximum health, turning it into fuel for his skills and his chosen one passive stacks. In a fire-focused team, especially alongside other fire units like Panther and Lufel who can consistently apply burn, he actually finds a decent rhythm. The problem is that he feels a bit like a puzzle piece waiting for the rest of the puzzle to exist. Right now he does his job, but a lot of his real value feels like it is being saved for future fire characters rather than the current roster. Yukimi Fujikawa, on the other hand, is a guardian who seems like she is trying to protect everyone but ends up playing favorites by accident. Her Oath passive grants a shield at the start of battle, but only to a single random ally, and she can keep refreshing that shield on the same target. The issue is obvious: sometimes the wrong person gets it, and you are stuck watching your damage dealers stand there unprotected. She can still apply a shield to one additional ally, but that leaves two party members completely exposed, which makes her feel unreliable in longer fights. Kotone Montagna brings an Ice Assassin kit that sounds cooler than it plays most of the time. Her follows-up attacks in Blade Dancer mode can be strong, but they depend heavily on Ice Crystal stacks. Those stacks are not exactly easy to maintain, since you either need to defeat enemies or trigger Winter Storm to build them up. On top of that, Ice teams just do not have enough strong support right now, so even when Kotone is ready to pop off, she often feels like she is doing it alone in an empty room. Tomoko Noge is probably the most interesting of this group because her buffing style feels like juggling knives while blindfolded. She builds Greenleaf stacks through Psyche Melody, and those stacks power her ability to buff allies, but the moment she buffs or debuffs, she loses them. In practice, she works best when glued to your main damage dealer, while also setting up Sleep, which is one of those status effects that quietly spikes your overall damage. She can be useful, but you really need to manage her like a resource, not just a support button you press freely. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Lufel, Motoha Arai, Yui, Kaio Tomiyama, Toshiya Sumi, Haruna Nishimori, Miyu Sahara, and Morgana. This is the tier where things start to feel like almost there but not quite, where characters in Persona 5 The Phantom X have clear ideas, but those ideas do not always translate into consistent performance. Lufel is one of those early game safety nets that feels amazing when you first get him. He keeps the party alive with steady healing and even adds an attack buff through his Starfire passive stack, which makes him feel like a solid all-round support. The issue is that once your roster expands, his healing and buffing get overshadowed by more specialized characters. He does not become useless, but he definitely shifts into a niche role, especially in fire team compositions where he fits more comfortably than in general setups. Motoha Arai, also known as Closer, has a very clear early spotlight, late struggle story. In the first palace, she feels incredible because so many enemies are weak to electric, and she can take advantage of that instantly. But her Wrathful Thunder skill is heavily dependent on landing shock, which makes her inconsistent unless you push her awareness to level 1 for better application rates. On top of that, Being the only electric persona user at launch means she is kind of carrying the entire element on her back until better electric DPS options arrive. Yui, or Bui, is where things get mechanically interesting but also a bit demanding. Her entire kit revolves around follow-up attacks, and she shines when paired with multi-hit teammates who can keep the chain going. She has naturally high critical rate and critical damage, so when everything aligns she hits like a truck. The problem is she relies heavily on her assigned player 2 actually doing their job properly, which makes her feel less like a standalone carry and more like a coordination test in disguise. Kaio Tomiyama, or Okian, is the kind of character everyone appreciates at the start of the game. Being free from the Trials of the Deep beginner event already makes her valuable, and her role as a navigator is simple but effective. She provides consistent attack buffs that help the entire team scale damage. As long as someone else is covering defense, she can keep pushing the team's damage upward without much complication, which is exactly what her early teams need. Toshiya Sumi, known as Sepia, leans into a cursed DPS identity built around verse stacks that modify his abilities. This stacking system makes him feel more technical than most 4-star characters, and as his awareness increases, his damage potential becomes more noticeable. Right now, he is a very solid option for curse damage, especially for players who did not manage to pull Joker from the Gacha banner, but he still sits in that good alternative, not top choice space. Haruna Nishimori, or Riddle, is basically a support engine disguised as a character with a cute name. Her Childish Heart passive stacks allow her to spend resources in flexible ways, either boosting healing and shielding received by the party or increasing their attack depending on what the situation needs. When played correctly, she does not just support strong characters, she actively upgrades them, turning already good units into something much more dangerous. Miyu Sahara, known as Puppet, is all about protection taken to the extreme. She focuses entirely on shielding allies, and her seashell stacking passive gradually increases the team's overall defense the more shields she applies. This makes her especially valuable in longer fights like bosses or challenge content where survivability matters more than burst. She also scales well with awareness, becoming more efficient the longer you invest in her. Morgana stands out immediately because he is the only character at launch who can revive a fallen ally during battle, even if it is limited behind a highlight mechanic. That alone gives him a unique level of utility that cannot be ignored. However, his passive design does not fully reward continuous healing usage, which makes his kit feel slightly awkward in long rotations. He still brings value through guaranteed windswept application and emergency support, but his overall flow is not as smooth or rewarding as higher tier options. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Riko Tanemura, Yao Ling Li, Leo Kamiyama, Ryuji Sakamoto, and Din Takamaki, Yusuke Kitagawa, and Kyokita Zato. Now, we are getting into that interesting middle ground where characters in Persona 5 The Phantom X are no longer struggling to function, but they still need the right situation to really shine. Riko Tanemura is one of those free value, no excuses type of supports once she joins Wonder's team in Chapter 3 of the story. Wind does not officially come into the team until that point, but when she does, Riko is immediately worth slotting in. Her kit is simple but extremely flexible, focusing on increasing team damage while also lowering enemy defense. That combination alone makes her fit into almost any team composition without needing complicated setups, which is exactly why she feels so consistently useful. Yao Ling Li, also known as Rin, brings some of the strongest debuff utility available at launch. Her ability to apply on-demand defense reduction already makes her valuable, but what really pushes her up is her Forget ailment, which can completely lock enemies out of using skills for 1 to 2 turns. That means no healing, no buffs, no debuffs, just a very confused enemy standing there. With Mengpo Soup boosting her ailment success rate, she becomes one of the most disruptive support characters in the game. Leo Kamiyama, or Leon, is one of those 4-star characters that quietly ends up carrying more weight than expected. His Power of Friendship passive scales his buffs based on how low his ally's health is, which creates a high-risk, high-reward playstyle. On top of that, he can provide shields, damage boost, and critical damage buffs while still contributing respectable nuclear damage himself. He is not flashy, but in the right hands, he turns messy fights into controlled chaos. Ryuji Sakamoto is built around a very aggressive idea that actually fits his personality perfectly. His rebound mechanic lets him deal damage when he gets hit, and his passive makes him stronger as his health drops. The problem is that he does not naturally draw enemy attacks toward himself, which forces players to manually lower his HP using his physical skills. When set up properly, he can hit extremely hard, but getting him into that danger zone consistently is the tricky part. Anne Takamaki stands out as one of the strongest fire units currently available, and she is especially valuable as a free 5-star character. She can carry early accounts through the game's opening stages with very little support, and even later on, she continues to perform well when built correctly. Her biggest strength is consistency. She does not rely on complicated mechanics, she just deals reliable fire damage and makes progression feel smooth. Yusuke Kitagawa, or Fox, is a more defensive take on a damage dealer, which makes him feel quite unique in the ice roster. His skills scale off his defense stat, and he becomes even stronger when shielded. Kenai turns his counterattacks into multi-hit damage, and his taunt allows him to indirectly protect the team while still dealing damage. The catch is that he really needs to stay alive to function properly, which means he benefits heavily from careful team building. Kira Kitazato, known as Mesa, focuses on sustained damage through bleed stacking and single target pressure. His damage over time setup can be strong in longer fights, especially when enemies are allowed to sit under multiple stacks. However, his overall impact is a bit limited compared to higher tier DPS options in other elements. He is solid but not essential, and usually ends up as a nice to have rather than a core pick in most teams. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Shun Kano, Seiji Shiratori, Ren Amamiya, Minami Miyashita, Chizuko Nago, Makoto Niijima, Yumi Shina, Tropical Motoha, Masaki Ashiya, Runa Dogenzaka, Mio Natsukawa, Goro Akechi, and Shoki Ikenami. At this point in the tier list, things finally start to feel like characters are hitting their stride, where most of them are genuinely strong but still held back by either team restrictions or timing issues in the current meta of Persona 5 The Phantom X. Shun Kano, also known as Soi, is currently standing at the top of the defender category thanks to his Wild Runner passive, which automatically forces enemies to target him more often. That alone already defines his role, but he also reduces incoming damage and can restore his own health through Desperado, which makes him surprisingly self-sufficient. When you pair him with shield providers like Leon or Riddle, he turns into a full-on damage sponge who can soak up almost anything thrown at the team. Seiji Shiratori, or Floret, is currently the only win DPS available at launch, which already gives him a unique position. His damage scales up the longer a fight goes thanks to his right to strike passive stacks, and when combined with windswept defense reduction and his own critical chance buffs, he can hit much harder than most players initially expect. He is one of those characters that quietly becomes more dangerous the longer the battle drags on. Ren Amamiya, or Joker, remains one of the most reliable cursed DPS options thanks to his extra action mechanic. Once he builds enough passive stacks, he gains an additional turn, and during that turn, his hidden abilities further boost his damage output. This allows him to spike extremely hard in burst windows, but newer characters have started to outpace him in raw efficiency, which is why he is no longer sitting at the very top despite still being very dependable. Minami Miyashita, known as Marion, is easily the most consistent healer in the game right now. She provides maximum health increases, direct healing, a heal over time effect, a cleanse for debuffs, and even a damage buff, all in one kit. That level of utility makes her fit into almost any team without needing adjustments, which is why she remains one of the safest support picks available. Chizuko Nagao, or Vino, is basically the specialist saboteur for elemental ailment-focused teams. She can apply multiple different status effects, which gives her a lot of flexibility in setting up technical damage. She also has situational usefulness against nuke-weak enemies, but her true value shines when she is paired in very specific setups, especially those centered around Makoto, which limits her overall flexibility. Makoto Niijima is one of the biggest rule changes in the current meta, thanks to how she interacts with elemental ailments and technical damage. As a nuke DPS, she is extremely reliable and consistent, and her kit effectively reshapes how damage is calculated in optimized teams. Because of this impact and her strong performance ceiling, she comfortably sits at the top of the tier list as one of the defining characters of the current version. Yumi Shina, or Phoebe, is a navigator who becomes significantly stronger when used in mono-element teams. Her tailor-made cocktails mechanic rewards repeated use of the same element, unlocking additional effects over time. However, this makes her much less beginner-friendly, since new players usually do not have fully built mono teams. For experienced accounts though, she becomes a very powerful and rewarding support option. Tropical Motoha, or S Closer, is currently one of the most dominant DPS characters up until version 2.1. She combines high survivability with massive blessed damage output, allowing her to handle both single target and multi-target fights with ease. On top of that, recent buffs have made her flexible enough to fit into almost any team, which is why she sits comfortably among the strongest damage dealers available. Masaki Ashiya, known as Cherish, specializes in high-quality shielding and defense buffs, making him an excellent partner for Fox since he enhances both survivability and damage synergy in that setup. Outside of that specific pairing, his value drops a bit because the game generally favors offensive pressure over heavy protection. Still, if better options are not available, he remains a solid sustain and buff option. Runa Doshinzaka, or Howler, is all about defense shredding, offering both single target and AoE defense reduction effects. Her AoE version has elemental conditions that require specific damage types like fire, ice, wind, electric, or resonance to fully benefit from the debuff, which makes her situational. When those conditions are met, she provides some of the strongest defense reduction in the game, but outside of that, she feels more limited. Mio Natsukawa, known as Matoi, is one of the first characters to truly explore the technical mechanic in depth. Even though she is an ice element character, her best setups often involve fire units because of Iceburn and the Fireburn interactions. This dependency on specific elemental pairings limits her flexibility quite heavily, which is why she struggles to find a place in more general team compositions. Goro Akechi is a unique almighty sweeper who stores damage from other characters and releases it as a sub-DPS with dual attribute scaling. In theory, this makes him very powerful, but in practice he requires a lot of setup from teammates before he can fully function. Even with his updated mastermind identity, his stored damage output does not quite reach the level of other top-tier assassins or sweepers, which keeps him from rising higher. Shoki Ikanami joins as the 5th Phantom Thief of the Wonders team and immediately stands out as a bless-based strategist. He provides attack and damage buffs while also dealing consistent bless damage himself, and his ability to switch states allows him to adapt his support effects depending on the situation. Because of this versatility and strong overall utility, he comfortably earns a place among the strongest support-style characters in the current roster. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Ayaka Sakai, Seaside Tomoko, Futaba Sakura, Haru Okamura, Frostgale Kotone, Firecracker Yaoling, Kasumi Yoshizawa, Mayumi Hashimoto, Yukari Takiba, and Akihiko Sanada. This is the part of the tier list where characters stop feeling situational and start actively shaping how teams are built in Persona 5 The Phantom X, because S tier is where raw power, flexibility, or meta-defining utility really shows up. Ayaka Sakai, also known as Cord, is easily one of the most consistent strategists in the game right now. Her access to highlights and strong single target buffs makes her a natural fit in almost every team composition. Since most teams revolve around a primary damage dealer anyway, she slides in effortlessly and amplifies that carry's output without requiring complex setups. The fact that her skill improvements only made her smoother to use just reinforces how universal her value is. Seaside Tomoko, or Summermoko, completely redefines her original identity by turning into a hyper-aggressive medic. Instead of passively healing, she now needs to actively deal damage to generate spark stacks, which then fuel her healing through Summer Reminiscence. It is a more demanding playstyle, but also a much more rewarding one. She fits into almost any team, but reaches her peak when paired with high-tempo damage dealers like Tropical Motoha, where offense naturally feeds into sustain. Futaba Sakura, or Oracle, is currently sitting at the absolute top of the support hierarchy. Her ability to both buff allies and manipulate enemy weaknesses gives her a level of control that no other character can match. She does not just enhance a team, she fundamentally changes how damage is applied across the board. Because of this, she is considered a must-pull character, and in many cases, she is the difference between an average team and a fully optimized one. Haru Okumura, known as Loire, is the first true psychic element main DPS and already feels like a long-term cornerstone for that archetype. Her AoE psychic damage scales heavily when supported properly, especially with allies that can boost her attack and ailment accuracy. Over time, she gains additional tools that further increase her range damage potential, making her a strong endgame option, particularly in content where psychic advantage matters. Frostgale Khotone introduces something very rare in the current roster, a dual element kit that allows her to switch between wind and ice. While both forms are usable, her wind form clearly stands out, offering high single target damage that can compete with top tier DPS units like Queen or Noir when matched against the right enemies. Because of this flexibility and raw performance in favorable matchups, she earns her place among the strongest characters in the game. Firecracker Yaoling is the second dedicated fire sweeper and brings strong AoE fire damage along with enhanced fire technical interactions. Her synergy with characters like Matoi pushes her damage ceiling even higher, since she can further amplify fire-based technical effects. When built around properly, she becomes a major damage engine for fire teams and significantly increases their overall output. Kasumi Yoshizawa is a blessed assassin who excels in highlight-based burst damage with the ability to land critical strikes that can reach extremely high numbers. Against single-target enemies weak to bless, she becomes one of the most explosive damage dealers in the game, capable of reaching six-figure damage outputs under the right conditions. This level of burst potential is what secures her position in the crown tier of DPS characters. Mayumi Hashimoto is a physical strategist who focuses on bypassing enemy defenses while also amplifying extra turn mechanics. Even though she is physical based, her true strength lies in enabling other DPS characters by increasing attack, damage bonus, and highlight damage. She is especially valuable in teams that lack strong defense shredding options, acting as a bridge between raw damage and consistency. Yukari Takeba is a support character who shines brightest in SEES-focused teams, where she can accelerate Fuji gauge gain and enable much faster access to powerful abilities. On top of that, she provides healing, damage buffs, and defensive debuffs, making her a well-rounded support unit. Outside of SES compositions, she remains useful but does not reach the same level of impact, which is why she settles into S tier rather than higher. Akihiko Sanada is a relentless electric damage dealer who specializes in sustained AoE pressure. His damage ramps up over the course of a fight, peaking around his third turn, where he can unleash significant electric burst damage across multiple enemies. He also gains bonus damage against downed targets, which makes him especially effective in controlling groups of enemies. While his kit is straightforward, it is consistent and strong enough to secure him a solid place in S tier. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Justine and Caroline, Tempest Riko, Manaka Nagao, Makoto Yuki, and Hatsune Miku. This is the absolute top of the food chain in Persona 5 The Phantom X, where characters do not just fit into teams anymore, they actively redefine what a strong team even looks like. Justine and Caroline sit in a very unique position as the first virtuoso role characters capable of switching between roles at will. Instead of being locked into a single identity, their value constantly shifts depending on what role they are currently fulfilling. That flexibility alone already makes them hard to compare directly with anyone else because they are essentially multiple characters in one. Their effectiveness depends heavily on how you configure them, but in the right setup, they can cover gaps no other unit can even touch. Tempest Riko is one of the most consistent critical damage enablers in the entire game. Her kit revolves around boosting critical hit performance while also supplying steady SP recovery to the team, which keeps rotation smooth and efficient. What makes her especially strong is how her buffs scale with critical multipliers and excess stats, meaning she continues to grow in value as your team gets stronger. In practice, she turns good damage dealers into explosive ones without needing complicated conditions. Manaka Nagao, known as Ange, is easily one of the most oppressive support-style characters available. She provides powerful offensive buffs like pierce rate and general damage increases, while also offering periodic healing to stabilize the team. On top of that, her ability to grant one ally an extra action effectively doubles their damage output during a turn, which is a game-breaking mechanic in the right hands. With that level of impact, she naturally earns her place in the highest tier of the roster. Makoto Yuki, the first Persona 3 Reload representative and SEES member to Arena, brings a very strong mix of consistent fire-based multi-hit damage and advanced mechanics like assist skills and Feoji. These systems significantly enhance his damage ceiling while keeping his output stable every turn. As the first fire assassin in his category, he can compete directly with top-tier DPS units across different elements, especially when properly invested. His combination of mechanics and raw output firmly places him in S+ tier. Hatsune Miku enters as the first collaboration navigator and immediately stands out due to her unique turn extension mechanic, which allows teams to squeeze significantly more value out of each rotation. She also provides a strong set of offensive buffs that slightly fall short of Ange in raw power, but compensate for utility and flexibility. Since navigator slots are always valuable, she effectively exists alongside Ange rather than replacing her, and her future scaling potential in upcoming systems only increases her long-term value even further. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.